Seats. On behalf of UNESCO, United Nations Information Center and Springer Nature, I extend a very warm welcome to you all at World Water Day celebration today. My name is Priya Vyas and I am the publishing editor at Springer Nature for Applied Sciences books. It is my absolute honor to be your host today for the event. We all know that the World Water Day is celebrated every year on 22nd March as a means of focusing attention on the importance of fresh water and advocating for the sustainable management of freshwater resources. Billions of people and countless schools, businesses, healthcare centers, farms, and factories still don't have the safe water and toilets they need. To accelerate change, we need more action. And because water affects us all, so we need everyone to take action. Thus, this year, World Water Day theme is to focus on accelerating change to solve the water and sanitation crisis. And thus, we all have gathered here today to discuss the issues, challenges, and opportunities in this regard, along with the new approaches that are being adapted internationally. The water energy food nexus is one such approach that moves away from the traditional focus on separate entities and also integrates management and governance across multiple sectors of food, energy, water, and ecosystems as being complex and inextricably intertwined. Globally, as well as locally, there is a growing acknowledgement of the interconnectedness between water, energy, food security, and ecosystems. Looking at its importance, multi-year collaboration between UNESCO, the Pacific Water Research Center at Simon Fraser University, Canada, the University of South Wales Global Water Institute, Australia, and the Korea Institute of Geoscience and Mineral Resources, South Korea, and with support from Springer Nature, we are publishing a series of 3 interconnected books, which we will all see being launched here today. All 3 books introduce complex links between water, energy, and food security and provide a special focus on the various cross-cutting issues such as climate change, gender inequality, rapid urbanization, and resource access conflicts. The 3 books diversify by discussing the water, energy, and food security nexus across the East and Southeast Asia regions, the Central and South Asia sub-region, and the Pacific region. Before going into more details, let me take this opportunity to briefly introduce all the 3 organizations involved in today's event. First one and the most important, UNESCO. UNESCO is the United Nations educational, scientific, and cultural organizations. UNESCO's mission since 1945 is to build peace through international cooperation, as it is the only way to build bridges between nations. Therefore, as a laboratory of ideas, UNESCO seeks to offer a broad range of expertise in the field of education, the sciences, and culture. On these programmatic platforms, UNESCO supports education for all, science for human beings, learning to live together, a culture of peace, and the free flow of information. Springer Nature. Springer Nature is a world-leading research, educational, and professional publisher who is advancing discovery by publishing trusted research, supporting the development of new ideas, and championing open science. They are committed to playing their part in accelerating solutions to address the world's urgent challenges. They work closely with a large global community of academic researchers and educators who, through their work, want to solve problems and disseminate their ideas and leave the world better than they found. They are working to reduce our environmental footprint, to promote an inclusive environment rich in diversity, and to forge links with the communities they serve. Coming to United Nations Information Center, that's the link the United Nations with people around the world they form by disseminating global UN messages to local audiences. The centers serve as a reliable source of up-to-date information about the United Nations, delivering information in their respective countries to a wide range of people, including journalists, government officials, civil society representatives, students, educators, and researchers. With several common visions and missions, today the three organizations have. The first one is the series of 3 books that we will see being launched, and we'll also get more information about them during the launch. The second important publication is the UN World Water Development Report 2023. Without taking any further time, may I now request Dr. Benobor to please deliver the welcome address. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Benobor is the Chief of Sections Natural Sciences at UNESCO New Delhi.
Excellencies, distinguished professors, Sir Philip Campbell, Editor-in-Chief, Springer Nature, Professor Adil Zafar, you can see him here on the screen, Executive Director of the Pacific Water Research Center at the Simon Fraser University in Canada, Dr. Yoonhee Lee, Senior Research Scientist at the Geologic Environment Division of the Korea Institute of Geoscience and Mineral Resources in South Korea, Dr. Andrew Dancy, Senior Lecturer and Academic Lead, Humanitarian Engineering at the University of New South Wales in Australia, Mr. Rahul Sachdeva, Senior Program Specialist at the National Institute of Urban Affairs in India, Mr. Jotraj Patra, Climate Change and Adaptation Specialist, Green Climate Fund Coastal Project of the UNDP, the United Nations Development Programme in India, Dr. Ram Bhuj, CEO of Mobius Foundation in India, Mr. Manjul Panwa, PhD Research Scholar, School of Environmental Science, Jawaharlal Nehru University in India, Professor Shahbaz Khan, Director of the UNESCO Office in Beijing and UNESCO Representative to the People's Republic of China, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Japan, Mongolia, and the Republic of Korea, specialists, university students, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, good morning and a very warm welcome to the UNESCO office in New Delhi. On this occasion, we are here to celebrate World Water Day, which is observed every year in the month of March. The UN World Water Development Report 23 has just been released a few days ago in New York. The theme for 2023 is Partnership and Cooperation for Water. We will display the report and make hard copies available to you in English and summaries in Hindi. The executive summary is also available in Arabic, Chinese, English, French, German, Hindi, Italian, Korean, Portuguese, Russian, and Spanish at unwater.org. Producing the book series that we are launching here today, the Water, Energy, Food Security Nexus in Asia Pacific, which we will also launch today, has indeed been produced in a wide-ranging cooperative partnership of international specialists, men and women from many different nationalities and backgrounds, and I sincerely thank the editors and authors for their excellent and relentless efforts putting this highly important publication together. Many thanks especially to Professor Adil Zafar, who is also the series editor of Springer Nature's Water Security in a New World. Thank you, dear Adil. It took a lot of time and effort. We had to circumnavigate a whole range of obstacles, often highly frustrating for editors and authors alike. Producing this publication during the COVID-19 crisis was highly challenging, and authors and editors had to put even more efforts into the production, review, and revision of manuscripts. Unfortunately, also a few of the authors had to drop out because of the COVID pandemic. We started the production of this in 2018, so also because of the pandemic, it took us such a long time. Our experiences on how to deal with the burden of bureaucracy and sometimes strange rules, which were difficult to be explained by the editors to the authors, especially on the utilization of geographical maps, should function as a source of improvement when starting to produce the next volume on water, energy, food security for Africa, the Americas, and Europe. a dialogue that we have already begun. However, even though we faced these obstacles, finally we managed to complete this work in a concerted action. This was possible through repeatedly remotivating a highly professional and well-understanding international crew. Let me thank Springer Nature for their long-term and excellent partnership, especially Ms. Margaret Dagnon and Ms. Swati Mehireshi. Margaret is normally in Dordrecht, Swati is in New Delhi today. They are both here with us. For their guidance, for their patience, and for their highly professional handling of this publication, which was not easy to be produced. Thank you, dear Margaret, and thank you, dear Swati. Let me thank my colleagues at UNESCO. Some of them functioned as authors, like Dr. Hans Tulstrup, Dr. Neha Mita, Dr. Nimita Pandey, Dr. Laura Veronica Imburgia. Thanks also due to Ms. Natalia Tolochka, Mr. Ian Dennison, and Ms. Cristina Puerta for providing guidance and advice for this open access publication that was produced in partnership with UNESCO, Springer Nature, University of New South Wales, Simon Fraser University, and KIGAM. Open access was challenging because it is significantly different to produce open access books when compared with for sale books. These books are available for free for everybody, but it reverses the mode of pay, meaning the editors have to find the necessary funding for the production. Thanks to UNESCO and our editorial partners, this was possible. Thanks are also due to Mr. Yusuf Murad for providing guidance on the sensitive handling of geographical maps that needed to be agreeable to all United Nations member states. And to put it mildly, we are not totally happy with the maps that we had to put into the books. We would have been much more happy with more up-to-date book maps. Finally, many thanks to Professor Shahbaz Khan. Thank you, dear Shahbaz, for your support throughout the project and for providing the forwards to these publications, which with you as the best possible authoritative advisor. The provision of water, food, and energy is an essential precursor for human living. However, human survivability is currently really in question for many less fortunate people in the world, including in Asia and the Pacific. Globally, there are billions of people who have great difficulties to find clean drinking water daily, hundreds of millions who struggle to obtain enough food, and over 1 billion who have limited or no access to electricity. The world population as it stands now is roughly 8 billion people. We are projected to reach almost 10 billion by 2050. That's not that far away, really, if we think about it. Which means resources management will become even more difficult because our planet doesn't grow, but our population grows. There are solutions on how to improve the situation globally. Hopefully these books that we are launching today will function as an encouragement to those in power to focus on peace instead of on conflict. Because peace is needed to achieve the coordinated and systematic application of solutions. Hopefully our book series will contribute a little bit. Again, I welcome you all to UNESCO, and many thanks for being with us here today.
Thank you, Dr. Benabor, for the welcome address. That sets the stage right for our next speaker. May I now invite Sir Philip Campbell to please come on the stage and share his insights and his thoughts about today's event. Sir Philip Campbell is the Editor-in-Chief of Springer Nature. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that wonderful introduction, Benno. You said a lot of very important things. It's a great pleasure to be here working with UNESCO. It's a great pleasure to be here with my colleagues in Delhi. I'm usually based in London. In case you're wondering, my role as editor-in-chief of the company has been, for the last 5 years, to be encouraging all aspects of research publishing across our imprints, Springer, the Nature Group, the Palgrave Group, BMC and Scientific American, all of those, to be focusing on research that directly addresses societal challenges. And the nexus question in terms of water, energy, and food is a fantastic example of that, both in terms of how it gets to grips with absolutely key issues, but also the challenge that a nexus represents. Priya put it well, it's a very core set of interconnections between those various strands, those various systems, which take a lot of effort to disentangle, and therefore there is all the more value in case studies where you look at particular locations to see exactly how that plays out. Attempts to try and produce systematic models. I'm speaking here with a degree of humility, I should say. I'm not an expert. You're going to be listening to experts soon. But from everything I've seen, attempts to produce global models, reproducible models about the nexus, especially of water, energy, and food, are extremely challenging. But that way of thinking provides a very important lens to try and understand how these forces work, whether at any level, at any scale. So I just want to mention, before saying more about the books, I just want to say there are two other projects I just want to highlight as part of what our company does. We have this whole program focusing on the SDGs, and one of the outputs of that has been another collaboration with another UN agency, the Food and Agricultural Organization. They run a project called Illuminating Hidden Harvests, and that focuses on the role of small-scale fisheries. Small-scale fisheries, whether in marine context or freshwater context, provide about 50% of the seafood that we eat. There's been a massive project looking at the data from 58 countries, looking at fisheries themselves, looking at the fish, looking at nutrition, looking at the role of women in fisheries, looking at economics, looking at just about every conceivable aspect of what these fisheries represent. And it gives me enormous pleasure that we are publishing a lot of the results of coming out of that project. They've just published their global report. We've published one or two of their papers, and there'll be more coming out in our journals. Another series that we publish is a formal series of series. It's called the SDG series, and it's a series of books produced by Springer and Palgrave, which focus each series on each SDG. And as you can imagine, that's a monumental effort, so it's great to see that it's gradually rolling out. I want to mention one other aspect of the nexus idea, where you're focusing down on exactly how things work. There's increasing importance being given to the interests of the knowledge of indigenous peoples. And that's a real challenge. In a sense, it seems to me, indigenous peoples looking at, for example, a particular environment in which they live, which may, for example, be a river catchment, they are a nexus in themselves. They are trying to, in their traditional way, deal with all these different things together. So how do you marry the sort of viewpoint, the framing, the spiritual, the ancestral, the other types of attitude, if you like, or framing that those peoples bring to their particular environments, with those of other people using basic traditional academic knowledge to try and produce better results for everybody. And that's a challenge that we're just beginning to get to grips with, and it's one of the things we're looking at within the company. So I won't go on anymore. I think these books are incredibly valuable because they really focus on particular regions, as you're going to hear, and they do try and bring together all of these different perspectives. It's a really monumental effort, and I thank UNESCO, I thank my colleagues, and above all, I thank the editors and the authors for all the efforts they put into producing these wonderful books. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for briefly summing up what great deals we are doing at Springer Nature in terms of our contribution to the world in terms of sustainable development goals that we are trying to cover through different books and through different programs that we have. Thank you so much, sir. Moving ahead, may I now request the team to please play the recorded keynote address of Dr. Shahbaz Khan. Dr. Shahbaz Khan has already been introduced by Dr. Benabor. He is the director of UNESCO Beijing office. So can we have the video, please?
Dear distinguished guests, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to extend my heartfelt congratulations to the launch of the book series on water, energy, and food security nexus in Asia Pacific. I would like to express my gratitude to the UNESCO New Delhi Regional Office for your kind invitation and for organizing this very timely event. Ladies and gentlemen, this book series provides a comprehensive and context-based understanding of the status of WEF security nexus in Central and South Asia, East and Southeast Asia, and the Pacific region. The authors of this book series have provided context-based knowledge of the status of WEF security, and they have explored the socio-economic implications of an integrated approach to managing these resources. Authors shed light on challenges that are produced by anthropogenic climate change and human population pressures, as well as by the diverse range of geographical, political, and economic conditions in each of these subregions. The series also contributes to possible solutions to current global challenges, including climate change, poverty, environmental crisis, and urbanization. It certainly recognizes the significance of both land and marine food systems, as well as the connectivity between water and energy. It emphasizes the importance of taking into account the unique culture, traditional knowledge, and ways of life across the region. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you will agree with me, this series offers innovative approaches and advanced nexus solutions to address the complex interlinkages between WEF resources, as well as between the natural and social systems in each of these regions. This is a timely contribution and is a roadmap to the global dialogue on sustainable development. The explosive population growth and the economic development in Asia Pacific region have certainly put significant pressures on available resources. It is imperative for us to adopt an integrated nexus approach to ensure long-term water, energy, and food resources in the region and beyond. It is noteworthy to mention that UNESCO published a book on WEF Nexus in 2017, which focused on the Arab region. As we celebrate the launch of this book series on WEF Security Nexus in the Asia Pacific, it is essential for us to recognize the importance of expanding this approach to other regions of the world. In this context, I would like to highly recommend to expand this series with similar studies for Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, as well as we should extend to Europe and North America in order for us to understand a better complete set of resources to manage our water, energy, and food nexus globally. These publications will offer important reference for policymakers as well as practitioners to better understand the challenges and to offer opportunities through this integrated approach in different regions of the world. This would contribute to a more comprehensive and integrated understanding of the nexus and will serve as a valuable resource for the global community to create a coordinated and collective response to address these global challenges and achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Once again, I extend my warmest congratulations to the authors, editors, and publishers of this book series. I wish all of them wonderful success in their future endeavors, and also special thanks to our dear friend Venugo for being such a critical element in pushing this book series with all concern. And congratulations to all institutions which have contributed in a wonderful way to make this series a big success. Thank you.
We are very thankful for the video address by Dr. Khan, and I'm sure that's going to inspire people, also the editors, to look at the regions that he mentioned about in terms of exploring and publishing books. It is now time for another interesting story. This is the story of a drop of groundwater that passes from hand to hand around the world, and the difficulties water is facing today. Impacts of major problems affecting water, including climate change, overuse, and pollution, are explained in this video. May I have the second video, please, on the screen?
I am a drop of water. I have traveled through the ages, through the soil, through the rock. I am ageless, yet I can sometimes be thousands of years old. I am groundwater. I am a modest drop of water. Many take it for granted that I can always come out of their tap. And yet, as a result of climate change, poor water management, and the illusion that I am inexhaustible, taps could run dry all over the planet. So, what can we do? Within 30 years or so, 2 out of 3 humans would live in urban areas. That will make cities highly dependent on groundwater. Many industries already depend on groundwater, as does 40% of our planet's irrigated land. And yet, I am being overexploited or polluted in many parts of the world. When that happens, the problem is often irreversible. And yet, I account for 99% of all liquid fresh water on the planet. I am some of the purest water on Earth, and perhaps our best hope for combating climate change. As long as you take better care of me. I am a drop of groundwater. I am your future.
Wow, that's a really brilliant video with a very strong and powerful message that we all gonna take home today. Right, so now, ladies and gentlemen, the stage is set right to have more insightful and conducive discussions on the first publication series we are going to launch today, the Water, Energy and Food Security Nexus in Asia, and the Pacific. let us now hear some great ideas and thoughts from our experts, which includes also the editors of this book series and representatives of other prestigious organizations. Let me first invite the moderator of this panel discussion, Dr. Benno Bohr, who is also one of the editors for all the 3 books on the East and Southeast Asia, the Central and South Asian sub-region, and the Pacific region. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Dr. Benno Bohr as the moderator for today's panel discussion. I will also take this opportunity to welcome all our panelists alongside Dr. Benno Bohr. We have a guest joining us online. The first panelist for today's session is Dr. Andrew Denzi. He is the senior lecturer and academic lead humanitarian engineering at the University of New South Wales and also the editor of the book focusing on the Pacific region. We have our second panelist today joining us online, Dr. Yoon-hee Lee she is a senior research scientist at the Groundwater Department, Geologic Environment Division of the Korea Institute of Geosciences and Mineral Resources. She is also one of the editors of the book focusing on the East and Southeast Asia sub-region. The third panelist joining us today online is Professor Zafar Adil. He is the Executive Director of the Pacific Water Research Center at the Simon Fraser University, Canada. He is also one of the editors of the book focusing on the Central and South Asian sub-region. In physical presence with us today, may I now invite our first panelist, Mr. Rahul Sachdeva. Mr. Rahul Sachdeva is the Senior Program Specialist, Water and Environment Vertical, National Institute of Urban Affairs, New Delhi. Welcome, sir. Next, we have Mr. Jyoti Raj Patra. He from Climate Change and Adaptation Specialist. He is at Green Climate Fund Coastal Project, UNDP, New Delhi. A very warm welcome, sir. Dr. Ram Bhuj, he is the CEO at Mobius Foundation. Thank you so much, sir, for coming today. Last but not the least, Mr. Manjul Pamwar. He's the PhD research scholar at School of Environmental Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. So now I pass on the mic to Dr. Benno Bohr to lead the panel discussion. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much, Priya. Good morning again, everybody. Thank you very much for being with us. Also, thanks for the panel. I think the panel has been introduced. We have 7 panelists, 4 live with us here and 3 online. So first we will invite a statement from each of the panelists, and then we will have 2 questions to each one of you. So, and I kindly invite you to take 3 to 4 minutes for your statement and then also for the answering the questions that I will ask you. So the order, to make it not too much online or too much panel-centric, so we will divide it. We will start with Rahul Sachdeva. So if you could please make a statement.
I don't know if I have a statement, but a couple of points as such. So I guess since I'm coming from National Institute of Urban Affairs, and our main constituencies are working with cities. So basically, I'm just going to talk about how this climate change administration from an urban water lens, and how we are working with NIU's vision of creating sustainable, inclusive, and productive urban ecosystems in the country. So now when we look from the water and climate change, we say that are extricably linked, because if we see water is a primary medium through which we perceive the effects of climate change. So whenever we hear, there are instances of extreme droughts, there are instances of extreme flooding. So water is kind of always seen as a medium to show the magnitude of the kind of the impact which the climate is kind of causing. So just to kind of share some broad statistics, only 0.5% of the Earth's water is usable and fresh water available. And with climate change becoming more kind of prominent, it's kind of impacting the water scarcity as well as the water-related hazards. If we see, global water use has increased sixfold because of growing population and more because of urbanization. So there is increase in the water consumption, and groundwater depletion has doubled between 1960 and 2000, and we have seen that how groundwater is kind of very important moving ahead. And if we see that globally, the groundwater use could increase 30% by 2050. So that means a lot of actions need to be taken in that regard, and we have to really look how we use our surface water resources in a more efficient and sustainable manner. Now, when we look at in terms of the people, again some numbers, we see that by 2050, almost 40% of the world's population is going to be under severe water stress, and I think Asia would be one of the region, and India would be one of the country would be severely impacted by the water scarcity in the coming time. So my overall take would be like, in the context of urban areas, climate change will, kind of manifest pressure on the quality and quantity of the water that is available. Vice versa, because of urbanization, the cities will also exert increasing pressure on water resources, and there will be always, competing in terms of the consumers, be it for domestic supply, be it for industries, or be it for agriculture. So without good management strategies, it will going to have a huge risk to life. And I think moving ahead, the sustainable management of water resources would be very crucial for urban climate resilience, and frameworks and approaches that talk about integrating sustainable urban water management practices, which includes climate change adaptation at its core. I think moving ahead, that would be very critical. So I see cities playing a very critical role in an overall basin context. Earlier, we were thinking of planning at integrated water resource management at basin level, but now cities will have to play equally important role. We need to talk about integrated urban water management and draw synergies with larger basin level plans, so that cities, they themselves become more sustainable and kind of contribute to having been less impacted through the climate change and its manifestations. So yeah, that would be my take on that.
Thank you, Rahul, for highlighting the importance of cities and urban environments. Of course, most of mankind lives in urban environments, and most of these urban environments are not sustainably managed. So it's a huge challenge for all of us. The next panelist that I would like to invite is Andrew Dancy from Australia. Andrew, very sorry that you can't be here with us. We are very sad, but at least you are with us online. The floor is yours, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Benno, and thank you very much for having me. We're currently in a climate crisis, and we've known we've been in a climate crisis since the 70s, yet the Pacific region itself and the Asia Pacific more broadly will not meet any SDGs by 2030. We have increasing carbon emissions. We're not following the leadership request that we're seeing in the Pacific. We need to resource the Pacific leaders and resource the High Ambition Coalition to reduce our carbon emissions and move forward towards a net zero future. We need to resource and support the local capacity and work with the locally led priorities of the Pacific. One thing that we've undertaken while doing this book is having a very broad range of authors from as many Pacific Island countries and territories as we can, as well as also in Australia and New Zealand, part of the region that we've been working with for this book. And I've been very proud to work with yourself, Benno, and also Dr. Heidi Alleyway as co-editors in this book, and 54 individuals from across these different Pacific Island countries and territories, as well as Australia and New Zealand, and also internationally, to contribute to this problem. The Pacific, or Oceania, is a very unique part of the world. It covers roughly a fifth of the world's surface, but it's mostly the open ocean, and is sometimes referred to as the blue continent. The Nexus offers opportunity to advance each water, energy and food sectors, as it does in the other regions that we'll hear about today. In the Pacific, the sheer distance and the interconnectedness over such a large area brings additional challenges. We're seeing increased intensities of storms that take out critical infrastructure, such as marine and road and air, that are essential for bringing supplies and food into many of the Pacific Island countries and territories. We're seeing that we know that carbon is part of the problem, and carbon must also be part of the solution. as we move towards the Paris Agreement net zero aspirations of 2050. We cannot just focus on carbon, and we must also keep in mind the water, energy and food sectors and the needs there. This must be underpinned by a sustainable environmental backbone. We must look after the environment first, and once we have done that and addressed the environmental SDGs, only then will the societal SDGs be sustainable, and after that the economical. As for those familiar with the wedding cake analogy of Stockholm Resilience Centre, that approach to the SDGs and working in nexus fashion is something that really came through in the Pacific, having all of these small island nations spread out over such a large area. Thank you very much again for having me. I look forward to hearing from more of the panel as well.
Thank you very much, Dancy, also for pointing out the interconnectedness between climate and climate change and the oceans and the small island developing states that we call SIDS countries, which are expected to suffer sooner and more intensively from climate change issues in comparison to continental countries. Next panelist is, I hope I pronounced that first name correctly, Jotraj Patra. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation on this very important topic. So in terms of the whole nexus thing, I will focus on four important things, 4 C's in fact. To start with, as we are discussing this in the backdrop of the UN, the World Water Development Report, and the theme, as many of you know, is cooperation. And for me, that is very critical. When you're talking about the nexus research or the nexus practice, cooperation is absolutely critical. And here I'd like to emphasize on the need for the transboundary regional cooperation, because we are speaking in the context of the South Asia region. And as many of you would know, it is one of the least integrated regions in the world. We have trade, we have people, we have connectivity programs picking up in the region. But when we talk about the regional cooperation, I think that is one area where we need to emphasize a bit more. So that is my first C on cooperation. The second one is co-production, and I think this is very important because I see a lot of academic institutes being part of it, and having worked in the science policy interface with government, with bilateral, with multilaterals, one of the things I have experienced is there very, very limited interface between the scientific and the policymakers and the practice community. And this is where the major challenge, in my opinion, remains as far as the implementation is concerned. So it remains quite a scientific exercise, which is very important, but it is also important for us to think as to how do we bring in these actors as part of the whole process, treating not them as just end users of the whole knowledge that we are producing, but making them an active contributor and participate in the whole nexus approach. So that's the second focus. The third one is on coasts, and I think Sir Peter Campbell clearly highlighted the issue of small-scale fisheries. I work for a coastal resilience program in India, which is funded by the Green Climate Fund, and I think this is an area where the nexus links are quite evident, but not much has been done so far in terms of how do you bring in different actors, different sectors. When we're talking about coast, cities are very important. So that is one geography where I think moving forward we should be focusing more on the coasts. And the last important point I would like to highlight is the role of communities. How do they participate in the whole process when we are talking about implementing some of these activities at the ground level, in terms of their participation, their engagement, the role of the indigenous communities, particularly women and youth. That is very important when we're talking about the nexus where there is a strong element of livelihood, water security, and leadership. So I think that is my last point in terms of how do we bring in more community participation, active participation of communities and their leadership in the nexus research and practice. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jotraj. So 4 very important points. Cooperation and the limited interface between scientists and decision makers. I think this is the biggest weakness that we have in science communication. Often scientists communicate to other scientists, forgetting that they also need to use a language that they can reach decision makers, and then the decision makers don't really understand. But it's also a point that many of the people in decision-making positions, they do not have educational background in water, environment, climatology, meteorology. They often have a background in judicial science or in politics or so. So how can they possibly understand? So it's also important that we will bring up a new generation of politicians which have a background in the field at their responsibility. The second point was, one of the other points was coasts. Perhaps if we combine that with Dancy's statement, cities at the coast, because that's precisely the challenging area. And it's also the area most impacted by climate change issues, where it can be felt most. And then yes, community participation, of course, and that includes all the people of less fortunate compartments, let's say, people who live below the poverty line. Very important to involve them. I don't know if anybody of you ever experienced how it feels like to be really, really thirsty, to have no water available that you can drink. I've been there once in my life, and I can tell you, it was not a joke. It was my own mistake, by the way. In any case, the next speaker, Yoon-hee, if you are ready in Korea, please give us your remarks, please. The floor is yours, Yoon-hee.
So thank you, Benno. Can you hear me?
Very well, thanks.
Okay. So first of all, it's a great honor to join this event, and I also send my apology only for joining this event virtually due to my conflicting schedules. About the the book production, it has been a long journey for us to come here. But I believe that this book is uniquely positioned between the academia, practitioners, and policy groups to address the water, energy, food nexus challenges. So from the very beginning of this book, so we tried to engage experts from different fields, including academia, international community, and policy advisors, and find more cross-sector conclusions. So I'm very proud of introducing this book series to the world. So serving as an editor for East and Southeast Asia volume, I once again emphasize that the Nexus approach is urgently needed for effective and sustainable management of the water, energy, food resources. We cannot survive without any one of these. So these are all critical, not just to the socio-economic development of our society, but also to the very survival of ourselves. However, the fragmented and separated approaches ignoring the deep relations between water, energy, food have resulted in competitive consumption of these resources and serious environmental concerns. And these issues are of particular importance in East and Southeast Asia, which have experienced the very rapid socioeconomic transform and which are under the increasing pressure of climate changes. So summarizing my talk, I want to highlight the three key messages of this book. Number one, home to about 30% of world population, East and Southeast Asia region has its unique importance in terms of global economic change, food productions, and geopolitics. So the security of water, energy, food of this region has a large global impact in both socioeconomic and environmental perspectives. And number two, as a result of rapid development and population growth, many countries in this region have now suffered from the serious environmental and social concerns, including inequality, urban issues, natural hazard, environmental pollution, and climate changes. Additionally, compared to such a dramatic growth, infrastructure and public support systems still lag behind the development in many parts of this region. And the region's economy is still largely dependent on the resource-intensive products such as agriculture, driving more rapid depletion of water and the interconnected impacts to food and energy. So consequently, the security of water, energy, food resource, and socioeconomic development of this region are now severely threatened by the inefficiency of these resources and uneven access of these resources, particularly to the vulnerable groups. Number three, without substantial reforms in the policies and practices for water, energy, food resource management, the region will face serious challenges arising from limited resource availability. And in the context of East and Southeast Asia, developing future nexus scenarios and plans should be conducted based on the state-of-art scientific research, technological innovation, policy reforms, and multi-sectoral cooperation. And also, given the natural diversity of socioeconomic and environmental context of each country in this region, the approach also needs to address both country-specific and regional perspectives. I think I'm running on my time, so we conclude my talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yoon-hee. Also, Uni, thank you. You can see that the panel here is very masculine, and you are actually the only woman in science. So, special thanks for you for also functioning as a female scientist, as a chief editor for the East and Southeast Asia volume, and congratulations for the achievement. It's very important, but the subject that we have here, which is water and energy and food, they are traditionally very masculine subjects. So we need to break away from that and mobilize the power that the women can bring to the table, which is, of course, at the heart of UNESCO, one of our overarching global priorities. Ram, you know that very well, having served with UNESCO for so many years. Thank you for pointing out that we try to involve scientists, practitioners, and policymakers in the production of this volume. That's precisely what we try to do. It's not that easy. We know, as I said before, that science communication is a big challenge. And also thank you for pointing out that the environmental degradation that comes with the population growth and with the economic growth, we have to be very, very careful with that, because our planet, as we all know, is not growing. And we also know, I think it's nothing new that I'm telling you, that we are consuming currently 2.5 times the capacity that our planet really has to offer. So we have to be very careful together. Yeah, the next panelist is Ram Bush. Please, Ram, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Benno. And I think at the very outset, let me congratulate you, other UNESCO colleagues, and of course, entire Springer Nature team for bringing out this very timely publication, WEF, Water, Energy and Food Nexus, very timely. Of course, World Water Development Report is an annual phenomena, and for many years I have been involved in this, and this year's is very significant. Let me begin with another WEF, World Economic Forum report, which every year they come out with global risk report. And of course, means for the immediate future, for 2 years, cost of living is their priority, the major risk, but all other top risks, they are environmental. Failure to climate action, water, biodiversity, disaster, all those environmental risks. And long term, definitely, it's all becomes environmental, climate change leading, and of course, biodiversity and nature loss is another phenomena. The other major report that has come out very recently, last week only, was that of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC report. And I think that's the final warning of scientists. The synthesis report, which I think provides an opportunity for all of us to ponder over this crisis, and there is no time, there is no window of opportunity to relax anymore, because time now is to act. In this scenario, what is happening? In fact, we all know the two COPs has happened very recently, last year, November, December, COP27 at Sharm el-Sheikh. That was quite disappointing to many. Of course, there were some positive developments, particularly on the loss and benefit front, but that contour of that is yet to be developed. The other one, of course, biodiversity and the nature, which I am very positive, because the development that 30 by 30 by 2030 is, I think, one of the most revolutionary or most outstanding achievement that humanity could do. And this has recently been again, in the terms of oceans, the this agreement which world has reached for the oceans, that again echoes the same, the biodiversity agenda. Similarly, oceans also, oceanic biodiversity, 30% of the seascape has to be protected. That's PS, which is hardly 8% on the ocean front, is going to be 10%, 30% by 2030. That is the commitment, and that's a great achievement on the ocean front, because oceans are key to climate action, key solution to the climate crisis. I have worked for a long period with UNESCO, with Benno and other colleagues, and in 2009 we came out with a publication with the help of Macmillan publishers, and it was on biodiversity, water and food security. Of course, this nexus whole, we thought about it, and I think Shahbaz, our colleague, he mentioned about that this WEF must be expanded to all regions of the world. But I think somewhere nature and biodiversity is so important, we cannot ignore it, because the whole issue of food security and particularly nutritional security lies in nature, in the biodiversity. And it has solution to not only climate change, but many of our planetary issues. UNESCO's Ban and Biosphere program, which we have been spearheading for almost 50 years now, is one of the, I think, key programs which combines this sustainable development linked with communities or the human-centric development, the biosphere, and man, of course, which is part of it, but it again is like when we talk about 3030, the biodiversity framework that was agreed by the world leaders, I think UNESCO's biosphere reserves, they are the key, because they are the sites for sustainability, for education, for community involvement, for many practices as we think of to solutions of the planetary crisis. I think for now, another thing, just I would stop by saying that at this new foundation where we are working, we are focusing on the population issues, the demographic issues. And this is again very important, because though the total fertility rate in many regions are declining, but still that population momentum is creating a lot of pressures on our natural resources. And this whole WEF nexus is very much the center of it, is the population growth as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rambuj. And yeah, so you mentioned the risks, the global risks that we have. So I think it requires a rethinking of everybody, particular governments really. Governments are still putting budgets into areas where they do not belong, because we are defending ourselves against something that we don't need to defend ourselves against, instead of the obvious, which is climate change and biodiversity loss and water calamities and pollution, which we really need to find defenses against, but we are not investing enough for that. Thanks also for pointing out the climate summits. We all have been not only disappointed since the climate summit in Glasgow or the one in Sharm el-Sheikh. Now we are expecting something new coming up in Dubai, the next one, in late October, November in Dubai. Hopefully there will be a change. I think the change is urgently required. It will be COP28. That means it's a series of 28 years of really talking and not achieving enough. So we really have to find a way from rhetoric to action, which is very, very important, and then implement it locally. And thank you also for pointing out the importance of UNESCO biosphere reserves, which are areas for living in harmony with nature. Adil Zafar, also he is the series editor of Water in a New World. So many, many, many thanks, Adil, for not losing your nerves over the last few years maybe you can tell us a little bit something about that. So the floor is yours, Adil. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mano, and I'm really grateful to UNESCO for having organized this event. And I'm really pleased with the quality of panelists that you have managed to gather. I think the discussion is very useful. Before I get to my comments about the Central and South Asian volume, I do want to recognize UNESCO's partnership with us, particularly with this series. And going back to 2016, when we published a similar volume on water, energy, food nexus for the Arab region. And from that experience, we learned that this type of topic was very much in demand, and there was an expression of need from the governments in that region that really gave us a lot of confidence that we needed to do something similar for Asia and the Pacific region. And as you pointed out, Benno, this partnership started back in 2018, and it has taken us a few years to get it all cranked out, but at the end of the day, I think it has been a very interesting experience, and hopefully the 3 books that we are launching today would similarly will be well received by the different governments and other stakeholders that would be interested in this manner of discussion. Let me talk a little bit about the Central and South Asian volume, which I had the privilege of being the lead editor together with Benno. I think in terms of the problems and the challenges they're quite similar across to the other 2 regions as well, so I will not focus on those so much. I do want to talk about 2 aspects which came out from this book. One pertains to the kind of reasons and logic behind why Central and South Asia should be considered together as one whole region as opposed to 2 separate regions. And the second is the kind of opportunities which are right in front of our nose, and we want to be able to utilize those opportunities to our best extent, and that's the key set of lessons which are included in the book. So coming back to the first point, why do we want to focus on looking at the Central and South Asia together as one region? Now, there are obviously a lot of historical reasons. There's lots of shared culture. There's lots of trade routes that have gone up and down, both north-south and east-west that connect these 2 areas together. And there's lots of shared history, and some of it is positive, some of it not so positive, but there are certainly those linkages that tie them together. If you look at the current scenarios, there's also a lot of geopolitical considerations which are shared and common. And I think the most prominent example is the political unrest that has gone on in Afghanistan for nearly 3 decades, probably even longer if you start back at the very start of the problems in that country. But that has affected all its neighbors, and it has had an imprint on the geopolitical stability of the region. Similarly, the ongoing the series of tensions between India and Pakistan have had also significant consequences for the region. Having said that, there is an emerging understanding that the Central and South Asian region have a lot of potential for working together, and we've seen things like the Chinese initiative to build the Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI, that tries to string all these countries together. And the other unique element, finally, of this region, why we should consider it together, is that many of the water resources are transboundary in nature, and many of them originate in the same location in the northern part of this region. So again, it makes us ponder about the reason for looking jointly at the region. So that's the first part of the conclusions from the book, that there is a sense of commonality which should bring Central and South Asia together. Now, let me go to the second part of where the opportunities are, which were pointed out by the several experts who were contributing to this volume. So the first opportunity pertains to the opportunities for trade and economic cooperation. if you look at the region collectively, the size of the current economies is larger than that of European Union, but we don't see the same level of weight being thrown anywhere around. And the reason is that we have not really utilized those opportunities for common trade. It's probably one of the only regions in the world where there's no shared energy corridors. Now, there have been a number of efforts, but there is a huge potential for building those energy sharing networks, whether it's on the fossil fuel side or it's on the side of sharing hydropower across the countries. There's also, a number of the authors pointed out the potential for improved sharing of transboundary water resources. And again, there's not enough of these multilateral agreements in place that will help us take full benefit of these shared water resources. And of course, by building on those notions of sharing of these resources, there's opportunities to perform much better. And finally, one area which I found very interesting was the cooperation on responding to natural disasters and having building shared early warning systems and also the response systems to many of the disasters that have struck this region. If you just look at the last decade, there have been major floods in practically all the countries in the region, and none of the countries have the capability on their own to respond to those kind of disasters. And so by combining their resources, not only is the early warning process has the potential to work better, but actually you can also have better responses more timely rather than looking for somewhere else for the European Union or for North American support to come in. The region itself has enough potential to bring its resources together. So those are just some of the very few highlights that I wanted to point out. The book is very rich in information about how these potentials can work out. And one final thought I would leave with is that to have material progress on these areas of potential cooperation, we found that the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is an excellent framework because it's comprehensive, it's in nature, it's ambitious, and that will allow us to work together and work towards an international outcome for the region as a whole. So those are just my comments. Hopefully there will be an opportunity to expand a bit more in the discussion later on. So I pass the floor back to you, Benno.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Adil, for these excellent insights. Thank you also for reminding us that the 3 volumes that we are launching today from Asia Pacific, we already had one launched for the Arab region, and we are already in process in the very beginning, though, to discuss with Springer Nature and UNESCO for the publication of Water, Energy, Food Security Nexus in Africa with our office, the UNESCO office in Nairobi, with Hubert Geisen and Alexandros Makarigakis. After that, of course, it would be logical to complete this book series with Latin and Central America and with Europe and North America. Adil, you also pointed out the opportunities, the importance of economic cooperation and transboundary cooperation, rather than keeping long-lasting conflicts alive, like you mentioned Afghanistan in particular, but also the sporadic conflicts between India and Pakistan. I cannot agree more that if we really want to solve these problems, and we can, there are solutions for many of them, we need to have stability first, otherwise we cannot. The next panelist is Manjul Panwar. The floor is yours, Manjul.
Thank you very much, Dr. Benno, first of all, for inviting me. And it is a very enriching experience to listen to all the experts here. So firstly, I would like to add on to the discussion that has happened so far. As we saw that video of groundwater, so one of the things that was missing in there was the problem of over-extraction of groundwater. Recently, there was a report in Delhi. because of over extraction, there is subsidence reported, especially in the southwest and southern parts of Delhi. And as we see in Joshimath, though it's not yet scientifically 100% proven, but it is attributed to the collapse of the aquifers. So maintaining the aquifer quality and letting its quantity be present without over extraction is really important. Earlier there used to be like one hand pump or a one tube well for quite a big area, and now there are they had the first conference on water day, and they focused mainly on water availability, clean water availability for everyone, and secondly sanitation. For this I see a hope that the world can learn from India, the way Swachh Bharat Abhiyan was launched, and that is more what made that Abhiyan or that mission more important and more successful was the scale at which it was done. That scale is required. You need to take actions and build such structures like toilets in millions. And secondly, public participation. Public has to be involved, and that creates a sense of ownership in the citizens that yes, we are responsible for this, we are doing something, and the more ownership they have, the more responsible the citizens become. And third, when we see about water overuse or saving water, conserving water, mostly you see the overuse and misuse of water is in areas where there is water is in abundance, where water is in abundance. The places and areas where water is in scarcity, those people use it more efficiently and they know the value of that water. If we see in India, if we try to think, the first state that comes into our mind must be Rajasthan, which has less water, like historically, and it is has desert region. But same Rajasthan has a city called Udaipur, which is known as City of Lakes, and most of the lakes there are artificial lakes. Their rulers made those lakes centuries back, some in the 15th century, 17th century, 18th century, and you see a series of step wells across all Rajasthan. Even in Delhi, there are step wells. So this had been a culture in this country to seek solutions to problems rather than just accepting it as fate. So it is important that we revisit those traditional values as well as practices to ensure that the current water crisis is dealt with properly. And concludingly, I would say that circular economy is the trend right now, is the need right now, and circular economy should be adapted for water as well. You need to circulate water, reuse it, and that will make a significant change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manjul, also for pointing out the over-extraction of groundwater. We've seen the video in the beginning of this event, this small event that we have here today. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. The over-extraction of groundwater is not acceptable, really, especially if you go to coastal areas and you over-extract groundwater, you will cause saltwater intrusion. And then you can forget about your agriculture. You can kiss it goodbye. So over-extraction is very, very dangerous. It should be in balance with the recharge, of course. Also for pointing out the community involvement to achieve sanitation and hygienic conditions in SDG 6. It's very, very important if we consider that more than half of us have at least 1 month per year that we don't have access to fresh drinking water. Also the misuse of water you pointed out. For water, of course, there is an SDG. SDG 6 is for water. We have another water for another SDG for food, which is SDG 2, Zero Hunger. I was always wondering why we don't have an SDG for air, which is even more important. If you think about it, there's no SDG for it. But water is very, very important. It's actually more valuable than diamonds and gold and guns and arms and ammunition and all these things that we spend so much money on, because water is really what we need for sustainable human living. So thank you very much, and then let's go into the first round of questions. I'm starting with Rahul. So what worries you the most in the long run on water, energy and food security, Rahul?
I guess in the first round I was talking about cities, so maybe I will kind of limit my talk to water, because anyways it will have kind of linkages with both energy and food when we talk in an urban context. So now coming to India again, I would like to share few kind of some stats. So India is like 18% of the world's population, but having access to only 4% of its water resources. So I'm sharing this just to give the kind of magnitude that we are talking about, the numbers we are talking, and how water is essential in kind of sheer numbers. As we discussed earlier, so India's urban population would be almost like 50%. People would be living in urban areas by 2050. Total water demand would be expected to rise by 70% by 2025. But against that, if we see, the per capita water availability has reduced by 75% since independence. So from like 6,000 plus cubic meter per capita, today we are looking at 1,500 cubic meter of water availability per person. And that in the coming time is going to reduce further. On the other hand, if you see, because of the rapid urbanization, we are the kind of largest contributor to the pollution. So 80% of the water that we consume ends up as wastewater and going in the open environment, further contaminating our surface water and groundwater resources. And so like the global climate risk index, 2021 ranks India as 7th most affected country from climate related extreme weather events. So this would have a further impact on the availability of water as a resource, specifically when we talk about our urbanized areas. So I think, business as usual approach is not going to take us anywhere. So I think that, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of actions have to be, taken at a city level if we want to make ourselves climate resilient, if we want to make our water resilient. And moving ahead, I think there are a lot of approaches advocated internationally, be it water sensitive cities or water wise cities. We talk about integrated urban water management. So traditionally, we talk about when it comes to the supply management of water, we always look at using, identifying fresh sources of water for supplying. But, moving ahead, stormwater management, wastewater management, as you mentioned, how we can reuse that and put it back into the system, that becomes equally important. So there are various approaches, frameworks available. There is a new concept, I'm sure you would have heard, spawn cities concept, that to see that how water can kind of use their open areas, lakes, gardens to tap the flood water, because if in today's context, because of the rapid urbanization, because your catchments are broken, your natural drainages are broken, the idea is that this storm water just leaves the city. But I think that's not the case moving ahead. We have to see that how we can tap this water within the city, and we can augment that to our, the fresh water supply availability, so that cities can kind of, become water resilient in the coming time. So, yeah, I think a lot of these frameworks are there, and just to share that maybe very soon enough, we will be starting our work with UNESCO, wherein, this entire approach of integrated urban water management, everybody knows in theory, but then when it comes to practice, the capacities are not there. Cities are not capacitated enough to think holistically. So we are going to work in one of the cities of Gwalior, and we will be there working on creating first of all an comprehensive integrated water database, which kind of helps the cities to even take decisions when we talk about integrated urban water management. Unless the city knows that what kind of resources it has in hand, they are not going to plan it. So to have that database in the required format for the decision makers to make wise decisions. So we are going to work on it and prepare a very extensive database. That would be a starting point for us to make cities understand that what kind of resources they are available and how the allocation of those resources can be done for various users, for domestic, industries, agriculture. For example, for most of our users, we typically only think about using the fresh water as such. But if we look for gardening, horticulture, landscaping, for various other users, there's an opportunity that we use the treated used water. And we only treat it to the extent that which suffices the requirement. We don't have to bring it to a drinking grade and then use it for our various purposes. So just imagine we are using liters and liters of water just for washing our cars, but we don't realize the kind of energy that the city has invested in bringing that drinking water quality for from far off distances. In the case of Bangalore, they get their water 130 kilometers away. And just imagine getting water 130 kilometers to your city and you are using it for washing your car. That cannot be the case moving ahead. So I think, as you asked, Benno, moving ahead, I think a lot of actions that needs to be taken on ground, specifically in the cities, because now they are the main players in this entire ecosystem. And so there are frameworks, approaches, a lot of theory, a lot of knowledge by scientists is available, but it's now amalgamation of bringing that theory and putting that into practice. And that's where I think that organization like NIUA, where we work with cities and try to kind of, bring this policies and frameworks into practice. Yeah, thank you.
So you agree with me that water is more precious than diamonds. So thank you very much for pointing out the difficulties of water resources management in India and the rapid urbanization that then in turn it causes water pollution and the need to have cities more sustainable. Again, most cities are not sustainable. Some cities in the world are sustainable. We need to identify them, we need to look at them and perhaps try to copy some aspects of them. Yeah, thank you very much, Rahul. And now I'll give the floor to Andrew Dancy to answer the question. Andrew, what were the most difficult challenges putting a book like this together? Dancy, of course, being the chief editor for the Water, Energy, Food Security Nexus in the Pacific. Dancy.
Thank you very much, Benno. I've been thinking about this question. I think there's three broad areas that were very challenging in the publishing of this book, and one, of course, I think is common to everyone. It was COVID. I do think it is worth to acknowledge this. As the pandemic moved around the world, people went into lockdowns at different parts during different times, and this was very, very challenging. People with young children had to have them at home. People with middle-aged children had to homeschool them in many cases, and people without children might have been in very small apartments and were very confined. So going through all of the authors in different countries, in different parts of the world, in Pacific Island nations, as well as places like Paris and other Asian capitals as well, brought us closer in many, many ways. And we did have some authors that couldn't take on this, and with the pandemic being something that was so difficult for so many. But how lucky we are that we are able to continue our jobs, we're able to work remotely. And one benefit I think that did come out of the pandemic is that we are now much better at having these hybrid events and not having to do everything in person. So I do think that was one benefit to come out, being able to form these connections with people and be able to work more effectively online and also in hybrid events. I think that's something that we should hold on to and not just pop around the world as much as we used to. It's still important, of course. I think that was something that was, was challenging, but there was a benefit coming out of there as well. Another disruption in the Pacific I mentioned earlier on as well was natural disasters. When we had cities or nations going into lockdown because of major cyclones and storms coming through as well. So things beyond people's control, as well as the pandemic, was the natural disasters in this part of the world. And a third one that was uncovered by many authors, and some of us knew this already, excuse me, especially those in the synthesis chapters of the current state of water and the current state of food and the current state of energy, was the lack of data. In the Pacific region, data was really challenging, and many of the tables that we have, there was just no data. Data is very expensive to collect in the Pacific, again, due to that tyranny of distance, or just that vastness, both between countries. And also, if you're a country with made up of many different islands, and some of those islands might be very steep volcanic islands, access to get data is something that is very difficult. So those are the three main challenges that we had for the book. And I do think that something else that came through that was a positive was that the working together and the pandemic brought many people closer together as well. And there was that commitment there. I mentioned earlier that we have the climate crisis at the moment. By 2050, so we're now 8 billion people. We have another 2 billion people to fit on the planet roughly by 2050. We have to do more and less, which is why the nexus is so important to be able to move forward and live a more sustainable existence on this planet. And it was the people in the institutions and in the partners that are doing this incredible work. And not only are they doing this incredible work and dedicating themselves to solving or working on some of these wicked problems, they then volunteered their time to contribute their knowledge and their connections to this book. So without them, we wouldn't be where we are today. And it was that dedication and that commitment over many years to get this book to this state that was something that was really impressive. And I thank again all of the co-authors for this volume.
Thank you very much, Dancy, for pointing out the challenges such as natural disasters and cyclones, lockdown of countries, so you couldn't have access to the authors that you invited. Pointing out COVID-19, of course, now we are already in a phase as if we normalize, but COVID, of course, is still going on. We need to be very careful about that. And yeah, it's also good to point out that we shouldn't forget how blessed we are in comparison to many others who suffered much more than us here in this room during the COVID crisis. Yes, indeed, it brought the benefits of hybrid events and online events, and perhaps it also brought us mentally, us people in the world, mentally a little bit closer together, realizing that the challenges that we have are really the same everywhere. Lack of data, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think, again, governments should put the budget where it belongs, where it's needed, rather than wasting it on issues where it's very questionable, and so that we can invest much more money onto the sciences to obtain more data through good scientific projects. Jotraj, Patra, what are your concerns about the future on climate issues?
In terms of the concerns for the future climate issues, I think a lot of these previous speakers have already identified how this climate risk is felt across all the sectors and is a major threat to the sustainable development goals that all of us have committed to. Definitely one of the things that needs to, in my opinion, needs to happen at this point in time with regard to moving forward is leverage the opportunities. I think one of the speakers was highlighting SDGs, definitely that's one. But if you look into India's current G20 presidency, there is a lot of discussion going on around environment, sustainability, and climate change. There is a separate track on it. So this is definitely a good opportunity for G20 members, I would say, as one of the influencing gatherings to talk about some of the integrated aspects of climate, water, energy, and food security. Related to it, it's the finance part of it, and I think that is something we also need to discuss about. Where will the money come from when we're talking about initiating some of these nexus things? And here we could use the existing resources from different ministries, or maybe from the International Climate Finance, but also the new stream of funding that is coming for such integrated actions. And this is where I would like to emphasize the role of the private sector. And I think one of the things that if you look at the private sector participation in climate issues, it is growing faster and faster in my opinion. They have moved from the traditional CSR approach to now the integrated environment, sustainability and governance framework, ESG, and are committed to climate action, climate ambition. There is, as many of you would know, there is a CEO global water mandate where major companies CEO they have committed to water stewardship. So that's definitely an opportunity I would like to emphasize on. The dialogue with the parliamentarians and legislatures, and I think this is one thing we need to think a bit more in terms of how do you bring in these stakeholders to this whole dialogue and conversation on Nexus so that they are able to understand and take it forward in their regular policy dialogues and practices. This is all about leveraging some of the existing opportunities, in my opinion. The second important aspect I would emphasize is on localization of the nexus. So the whole nexus thinking, research, and all of this we see like confined to some international or regional dialogues or at the national level. Rahul was talking about cities. So I think there is an opportunity to localize nexus by investing a lot in capacity development of different stakeholders, particularly decision makers, for example, in India at the district level or, for example, at the municipal level. Do they have the capacity, the wherewithal, and also the institution framework in place to take into account some of these nexus thinking and opportunities? The other aspect is in terms of designing very context-specific solutions. And I think this is something that organizations like UNESCO and some of the academic institutes and think tanks can do and work together in terms of piloting some of those nexus thinking, either at a very specific city level or at a geography or even at the transboundary level. I think there was a lot of discussion on the transboundary part of it. And for example, IWMI is currently, the International Water Management Institute is currently doing a global program, as many of you would know, on nexus gains, where they are focusing on transboundary systems. And in South Asia, they are covering the Indus and the Ganges. So these are some of the initiatives from where we can take the evidence, the examples and the inspiration to localize some of these actions at the national, subnational or at the district level. And the third point I would like to highlight is also a little bit on the cost and benefits of Nexus. It is quite often we should not be under the impression that Nexus thinking is a silver bullet and solution to all the problems that we face. There are definitely costs and benefits associated with it, winners and losers. So I think that a trade-off needs to be clearly spelled out to policymakers and practitioners and other stakeholders. So these are two of my sort of interventions moving forward, leveraging the opportunities, and second is localizing the nexus. Thank you.
Thank you, Jyotiraj. Very well noted, leverage opportunities and localization of nexus. You highlighted the opportunities that could come from India's current presidency of the G20. So the G20, of course, they have a responsibility to live up to protecting us all better against ongoing climate change, because climate change is not something in the distant future. We are already in it. And climate change, of course, has always happened naturally, but now we have this accelerated phase of climate change based on anthropogenic factors. The role of the private sector you mentioned, I think it's very important, also especially the transport sector and the energy sector. They, of course, recognize that climate change is a reality, but they also need to do something about that. You mentioned the investing in capacity building for municipalities. I think it's very important. I think it's also very important here to refer again to gender participation, because we need to make these issues more balanced in terms of gender, because we will economically benefit from that. Piloting city-level projects or transboundary projects, perhaps at least for the transboundary projects, I think UNESCO could offer its platform of the World Network of Biosphere Reserves as training grounds, as training laboratories for climate change issues, but also for water, energy, and food security issues. So thank you very much, Jotrai. Uni, in Korea, what did you find challenging putting a book like this together?
So, in terms of a challenge in forwarding this book, one of the most difficult challenges was, of course, to meet the deadline. As Andrew said, COVID was a big challenge. And in addition to that, in this book, we invited 37 experts for 16 chapters and collecting the different stories from different authors, reviewing them and discussing the way forward was not an easy job at all. So taking this opportunity, I send my gratitude to all authors and editors of this volume, pushing their intellectual inputs forward, tackling all challenging processes, and also bearing all my pushes and many requests during the last years. Another challenge, particularly in terms of the contents of this volume, was how to best reflect the varying environmental, social, and cultural diversity of East and Southeast Asia region. As you can imagine, Asia and the Pacific region is famous for its high diversity in varying aspects. And looking at the 15 countries in East and Southeast Asia, it covers from Indonesia in the south to the Mongolia to the north, which have very different, climate and water availability conditions. In terms of socioeconomic status, the region also includes both countries with global top GDPs and the least developed countries. So adding to the inherent difficulties of nexus analysis coming from the complex link between water, energy, food dimensions, this varying environmental and socio-economic and cultural diversity has also created additional dimension of complexity. But at the same time, this region also shared many commonalities. There is a large consensus among the countries in this region to speak voices as a region and to move forward as a region. We are witnessing the increasing emergence of ASEAN or ASEAN Plus or Mekong River Commissions. So this region has shared its commonality as a region, but at the same time, each country has its very uniqueness. So in short, there is no simple solution, and this is actually ongoing question about our nexus challenge. So we need to reflect local, country level, and regional context at the same time to solve the nexus solutions. Secondly, this region also has experienced very rapid socioeconomic transforms, so the security status of water, energy, food resources are changing very rapidly. This means that the nexus approach to solving water, energy, food insecurity is urgently needed in this region, and also the nexus solution of this region might need more adapting approaches considering various future scenarios. So which means that we still have a way to go and work together. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Uni. And let me just also point out that from the chief editors for the 3 volumes, Dr. Uni Lee was the one who delivered the manuscript first. So thank you very much for that, Uni, for your hard work. You pointed out meeting the deadline was very difficult. I also experienced that for every single book that I either participated as an author or as a co-editor or as an editor. And my advice is, if somebody doesn't deliver, remind her or him politely, and then again, and if they don't deliver, just continue without them, because otherwise they will hold the whole process up. The diversity of Asia, of course, Asia Pacific is, I think it covers more than half of the planet, if I'm not wrong. So the cultural and socio-economic and climatic challenges are, of course, huge. You pointed out Mongolia and Indonesia, just for the audience to point out how big Indonesia alone is. If you make a link from London, where Phil comes from, to Istanbul, you can put Indonesia. Rambuch, what worries you the most in the long run on socio-ecology in India, Asia Pacific, or the world? Thank you.
Yes, the most worrying factor on socio-ecology a slightly complicated question, and I think in the ongoing debate on water, energy, food nexus, this is very important. Because often, of course, my fellow panelists mention about the community outreach and the community-driven approaches to some extent. But the whole debate that was, because if we consider climate crisis as one of the most worrying planetary crises, but most worrying factor there has been that the basic principle of common but differentiated responsibility has been in a way divorced with in all the international dialogues. Of course, there was added to it was the respective capabilities. But this happens not only in the climate debate, but also the debate on water, on biodiversity, and on many aspects, that this differential responsibilities and capabilities question is directly linked to the equity, the question of equity. I would give one example. I was traveling during a few years back, I think it must be when I was working with UNESCO. We were working with Kevala National Park, the bird sanctuary, which is a World Heritage Site. There was conflict because the UNESCO was about to put that site under the World Heritage List under danger because of the water losses, the water scarcity in that area that was happening, because there was conflicting water demand from the farmers, from the water supply to the nearby towns. The sanctuary was the last option for the planners, water planners, to consider about. So that was one. The other one was while traveling from Bharatpur to Delhi by the car, I just stopped nearby a place. I think something wrong. Just can you just find out what is something is going on there? Yeah. So on a stop, I saw a group of farmers. They were traveling by a bus, and there was public conveniences there, the so-called tap water, which was easily available earlier. But with the commercialization of the whole water industry, the bottled water, most of these public facilities have been made defunct. That's deliberate. And these farmers, they went there, and I was just watching that. They did not, because it was not working, and they had no intention to buy the water or the coke or any other thing. They just went back to the bus, sat there. So this is the question which is, I think, many of planners ignore. How these commercial interests, they jeopardize the public interest, the community's interest. This is happening, and of course the wildlife, the nature is last resort, because in Kevala there is still that question is still there, how to bring the water. UNESCO and Rajasthan government of India, we are trying to have equitable solution to that. That is one. From the point of the ecology, we talk about the ecosystem approach, the approach the ecosystem services, and I think UNESCO in 2015 we came out with a World Water Development Report, which was focused on nature-based solutions. And there I think some of these approaches, the ecosystem approaches, how they are threatened, how they are getting deteriorated because of our own actions. that is very widely, this extensively debated there. I think this question, these two questions, the community outreach or the question of equity and ecological integrity, these are quite interrelated, and unless we address in our discourses, I think the solution will always be far away. So I think an integrated approach involving ecological integrity as well as this question of equity must be addressed. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Ram, for pointing out these important points. Yeah, enhancing community outreach, I think this is something that needs done. It fits very well into the biosphere reserve approach. Thanks also for pointing out that socio-ecology is, of course, being impacted not only by climate change, but also by water calamities and biodiversity loss and air pollution. And then we have also the plastic pollution that comes from the cities to the rivers, to the coastlines, into the oceans, macroplastic and microplastic and nanoplastic. And for that, we do not have solutions yet, by the way. We really need to mobilize the universities for that. And that brings me to the question, how are the ecosystems that give us the food and the energy and the water and the air that we need, how are they being impacted by the cumulative effect from all of these issues? Because that is something that not many people really measure. So thanks a lot. Ram, let me give the floor to Adil again. Adil, what were your sentiments when putting this series of books together, because you are not only chief editor for the Central and South Asia volume, but also the series editor. So what have been your sentiments when we put this together? Thank you.
Thanks, Manu. Let me talk first about the Central and South Asian volume, and then I'll talk about this mini series of 3 books altogether. In Central and South Asia, we had a somewhat of a unique challenge that you find a lot of research and a lot of really excellent researchers who are focusing on the South Asian region as a whole. And there's a smaller but also a very rich body of knowledge on Central Asia. But when you try to intersect those two areas and seek out those who understand both Central and South Asia and who actually understand the linkages of these two subregions, the field of researchers is actually very, very limited. And that we discovered early on in attempting to find people who could talk with a lot of confidence on the water, energy, food nexus in the two regions. So that was, I think, our initial challenge. We were fortunate to find individuals who were capable enough and who had the expertise that spanned these two regions. But I can tell you it wasn't easy, and it was time-consuming to find those individuals and convince them to contribute to the effort. The second one is around the notion of gender equity around as it pertains to water, energy, and food nexus. And the challenge there is that a lot of the data that are coming from the water sector, from food sector, and energy sector, they're not really gender disaggregated data or gender disaggregated research elements. And there is data scarcity, as both Uni and Nancy have pointed out. But even more specifically, there's data scarcity around the notion of gender equity. And that makes it quite challenging to have strong statements about what is the status of gender inequity and how to address those for the region as a whole. And the third challenge, which is, I guess, to a lesser extent, but was still a challenge, as others pointed out, that availability of data and maps was sometimes a bit of a challenge. And of course, COVID-19 was a significant factor, but I found in the case of the Central and South Asian volume in particular, that wasn't the most significant contributor factor in terms of the extra level of effort or sometimes delay in the publication process that occurred. So I think those are the three main reasons: lack of sufficient research, lack of gender disaggregated information, and a general lack of data and maps. Now I come to your first question about putting together this mini series and nesting it within even a larger series in which we have already published about 7 or 8 books on this notion of water security and looking at it from different dimensions. I think when we started this enterprise and we had a first workshop in Bangkok in 2018, it was quite clear that the Asia and the Pacific region is quite wide and quite diverse. And as someone pointed out, collectively it contains more than half of the world's population. So our challenge was that we want to have a meaningful discourse on this very large region, and that was not possible to do in a single volume, and that's why we split it into 3 separate volumes. But that means it also triples up the work for finding the authors, for chasing them, as Yunhee was pointing out, that demanding that everyone deliver on time, and because of the challenges that I and others pointed out, that on-time delivery was a bit problematic. And at the same time, I'm very pleased that we together as a team worked very well. That made this a pleasurable exercise and less stressful than it possibly could have been to actually work together. The 3 volumes are set up in a way that they follow a parallel structure, so you can go from one book to the other and you will find that same parallelness of sections and how the chapters are sequenced. That's the same across the board. So yes, it is challenging to do 3 books at the same time, but when you find the right partners, that makes it actually not only work well but also make it very worthwhile. So I pass the floor back to you, Benno. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Adil. So, yeah, it's always challenging to identify high-quality authors and co-editors. But I think the 3 of you managed to do that, and I can applaud you for that only. So, the gender equity, again, very masculine subjects, and it's visible here on our stage. It's also visible in the chapters that we have to put together. I can only assure you that we tried as hard as possible to have a good gender balance in the book. And yeah, the availability of data, Dancy pointed it out, you pointed out again. Maps, again, we have to satisfy 193 member states, and many of them, they don't like the maps that publishing houses are using, so they want to be very, very politically correct, and well, we basically have to adhere to that. You also pointed out COVID again, and producing 3 volumes, not only 1. Yeah, by the way, I read yesterday that the hard copies of the book are expected to be ready on around the 14th of March. Manjul, what worries you the most with the future of young people in mind?
First of all, I see 3 challenges mainly in this context of water crisis. First of all, as already pointed out, urbanization. So there are basically 3 things urbanization does. First of all, concretization of the surfaces, which inhibits the recharge of the groundwater, and also it inhibits the natural flow into the surface water bodies also. Secondly, the pollution it creates, the sewage, increase in the sewage, the plastic pollution, and etc. Pollution level. And at the third point is the stress on the freshwater bodies to supply the water demand. So dealing on these 3 fronts in case of urbanization is important. Secondly, the investment and management of the water bodies. I work on urban green spaces and their ecosystem services in Delhi, and I've studied if you have 1 kilometer square area, it is easier to make a green space and maintain it than to make a water body in similar area, because the investment required is much larger in case of water bodies. So that is a challenge, how that is going to be done, how we are going to make new water bodies and maintain the existing ones. Third is the agriculture field. We know that a lot of water is used in the agricultural sector, and I think now it's time to shift from the canal system to drip irrigation and piped water in the irrigation field as well. And I think the government has also initiated a per drop more crop, I think it's called, and that needs to be scaled up, and similar activities have to be taken up. And to give you a example, a real life example of what urbanization has done to water bodies, like we all know there is a Najafgarh drain in Delhi, but how many of we know that it is actually a Sahibi river? It used to be Sahibi river, and now we know it by the name of Najafgarh drain. That river still flows Haryana, Delhi, Rajasthan, but in Delhi it's Najafgarh drain because of the excess amount of pollutants, sewage, effluents that are poured into that drain. So as pointed out the question that what young activists can do, young activists can bring these things out, research on these topics. Like we did a research on this, and we organized a series of lectures in Delhi University, Jawaharlal University, workshops, and we prepared a policy document and submitted to Delhi government. And luckily now the government and especially from the LG office, they have started to recognize Najafgarh drain as Sahibi river. So that's a very good thing. And LG office has also said that they're going to revive that river and increase and improve its water quality. So these are few things related to the water system. And lastly, for young activists, it is more important to choose their idols wisely, because climate activism is a growing hype or trend right now, and it is important to lead it in the right way and in the right direction with positive impacts and positive attitude. Thank you.
With the positive impacts and the positive attitude. That's exactly right. Thank you very much. Manjul. So, as a matter of fact, 2010 was the International Year of Youth. I think it lasted from August 2010 to August 2011, where the United Nations General Assembly already said we have to involve the young people in every walk of life. I don't think we have done enough on that. I think we need to do much more, especially to bring their sentiments and their hopes into the right direction and not into the wrong directions. I was just asked to wrap up, so there is no second round of questions. Yeah, I would like to thank all of the 7 panelists very, very much for being with us and for your active participation. Many thanks for our online speakers. Adil, I think it's very, very late for you, and Uni, many thanks. Dancy, again, very sorry that you couldn't be with us. Uni also tried to be with us. So for the audience, please try to get hold of these books that are available open access. That means you can all obtain the books and free of charge. If you want hard copies, of course, you can buy them from Springer. Again, I read their soft copies are for 40 euros and the hard copies 50 euros available. So please do that and use them. They should be available on the 14th of March. That's what I read yesterday. 14th of May, sorry, 14th of May. Thank you for correcting me. The youth challenge that you just addressed is very, very important. If we consider that the average age in Japan is somewhere between 48, 49, 50 years of age. Average age of China is 38. Average age of India is 28, and I think Iran is even younger than that. So that will also lead to the question of the need, the necessity of migration of young people to fill in the void in countries that will need to import people to keep the economy running. So, yeah, thanks very much. Use the books, and I'm concluding this session now by giving a big thanks to our UNESCO team, the Springer team, of course, but in particular in UNESCO, I would like to mention those who are helping us behind the scenes for the administrative support. Thank you very much, and I'm handing the mic back to Priya.
Thank you so much. That was a really power-packed, insightful, and thought-provoking session. I am pretty sure that this session would have run for more couple of hours without losing interest in it. But keeping in mind the time for everyone present here, we need to move on with it. So this brings us to the last section of our today's event. For this, which I would request all the panelists to be seated, please, on the stage. Please don't leave us. We would need you for some more ceremonies for today. Thank you so much, everyone. No, sir, it's incomplete, the next segment of ours, without you all being here on the stage. Thank you so much for the patience. Starting with the last event, section of the event, I would invite Margaret Dignan now on the stage, because now we are going to start the launch event for the books as well as the WWDR Report 2023. So, ladies and gentlemen, Margaret Dignan is the Senior Editor, Applied Sciences at Springer Nature. She is the person behind the publication of these books. She is the publishing editor, keeping the patients, guiding the editors, coping up with everyone, and bringing the books to all of you. Please, Margaret, come on stage and share your journey so far for the books. Careful.
Thank you.
If you would like to say a few lines.
So I won't keep anybody too long, because we've heard today from all the experts, so they have much better insights, of course, than I do. But I would just like to say, in January 2020, UNESCO and Springer consolidated their relationship with a partnership agreement to publish open access books, which has led us today to these publications. So it's been, as everyone has said, it's been quite a journey to get here. We've had many challenges in bringing the two organisations together, but gladly we were able to do that, and we've managed to bring the books out very soon in May. So I just would like to take this opportunity to thank everybody. We've heard about the challenges of meeting deadlines, things like that, but also the challenges of COVID and all those awful times that people have gone through. So we're very grateful to the authors and, of course, the editors in maintaining the momentum and bringing everything together to realise publication. So yeah, that's basically really what I had to say today. Thank you very much, in particular to the volume editors for all their hard work and dedication, and having to deal with me and my requests for information on time and deadlines, so that's very much appreciated. Thank you very much to UNESCO, and please, as Benno said, enjoy the books when they're available free online to anybody who likes to download them, and also the print copies are available. So thank you once again, and enjoy the rest of the session today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Margaret. We want you to be on the stage.
Oh, really?
I would, yes, invite some more SN colleagues on stage with us. First of all, I would now like to invite Mr. Venkatesh Sarvasiddhi. He is the Managing Director for India office, Springer Nature, and he has been kindly taken out time to be present at this event today. Welcome, Venkatesh. Now I would like to call upon Swati Maharishi. She is the Editorial Director for Applied Sciences, Rest of Asia, who has been working a lot behind the scenes for this launch and the entire event. Last but not the least, this event will never be complete if we don't have Sir Phil Campbell on the stage. Sir, please kindly grace the stage with your presence, and let's start the ceremony of launching the books. Sir, please gather here. Up to you. You can come forward in front of the tables. So I'm going to call upon the three books that we are about to launch. The posters are being handed over to the dignitaries on the stage. These are actually the covers of the three books that we are going to have this year, one after another. The first book is the Water, Energy and Food Security Nexus in Asia and the Pacific, East and South Asia region. The second book is titled as the Water, Energy and Food Security Nexus in Asia and the Pacific region. The third book is titled as the Water, Energy and Food Security Nexus in Asia and Pacific, Central and South Asia region. South Asia region, sorry. So ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the hard work that has been put into these three volumes. Very significant, very timely, and I'm sure they're going to be one of the best reads for all of you. Please do read the books. They are open access publications. That means they are available free of cost at Springer website. Thank you so much. I would like everyone to be on the stage because this leads us to the launch of the second segment, second publication. I can have the posters with me. The second launch is of the flagship report, the United Nations World Water Development Report 2023. This report is published by UNESCO on behalf of UN Water, and its production is coordinated by the UNESCO World Water Assessment Program. The report gives insight into the main trends concerning the state, use and management of fresh water and sanitation based on work by members and partners of UN Water. The report is launched every year in conjunction with World Water Day. The theme of 2023 is Partnerships and Cooperation for Water. The United Nations calls for boosting international cooperation over how water is used and managed through this report. This is the only way to prevent a global water crisis in the coming decades. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together again for this wonderful publication, really informative. Also, please note that the UNESCO New Delhi office has translated the executive summary of this report in Hindi. And the reports are also on the display at the reception outside the auditorium. Thank you so much, everyone. You may please take your seats down the stage now. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Yes, please. We have the last video to be played for today's event. This is the video about UN World Water Development Report 2023. Can we have the video, please? this brings us to the end of today's World Water Day celebration. With this, let me take the opportunity to thank wholeheartedly, first of all the dignitaries and distinguished guests who gathered today for this event with us. And not to forget the teams behind the scenes at UNESCO, at Springer Nature, at UNIC to make this event really successful. Also, I would like to thank wholeheartedly all the guests present online with us who were with us today right from the morning till now. I thank you all for your patience and your presence. That's all for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. You all have a good rest of the day and take good care. May I request all of you now to please join us for lunch outside. Thank you so much.